Good morning, Year 5. Welcome to your guided reading lesson. I'm going to apologise straight away. Coda and Willow are on a bit of a mad one. When you see the science video later, you will see me flinch quite a lot where they are bounding past my head. Although you might not see them because I've got the virtual background on. Yeah, they've been a bit crazy. They were asleep when I started and then they just went mad. So hopefully they are not too disruptive. We don't need to read too much this morning. We are using chapter 1 of the Narnia again, but please don't feel the need to reread unless you want to. You can skim and scan for bits and pieces later on, and that is fine. Okay, you don't need to reprint it if you've still got yesterday's. In fact, if you just want to skim and scan it on screen, even better, that is fine. No problems with that. So have a little look at what you did do yesterday. Was there any particular vocabulary that you identified that was maybe effective? And do we think that language choices have an effect on the reader's enjoyment of a text? Is there any relation to the books that we enjoy and the language that they use? So do we want our books and our stories and the things that we read to be full of rich and good vocabulary, or are we quite happy for it to be sort of mundane and low level? Do we think that actually when those vocabulary choices are rich and they are words that maybe we might have to look up, they actually create a bit more of an atmosphere because of the technical language that is being used? Is there a way of creating some of those things by using the language that we use? Something for you to think about. So have a think about what happened in chapter 1. So of course at the beginning we had the children. We know they were evacuated from probably London and sent off to the countryside somewhere. At school we talked about how they would probably have been quite upset about that. They would have been leaving home. They wouldn't have been leaving with their parents. It would have just been the 4 of them, and they were going to live with a stranger. When they got to the stranger's house, Lucy was a bit frightened to start with, because the professor had shaggy white hair. He was unknown, so I think she probably was right to feel a little bit frightened. Edmund found him quite comical. He struggled to keep himself from laughing. Anyway, they decided actually that the professor was all right. They liked him, and they were pretty much sent to bed not too long after. We didn't really find very much more out. They were sent to bed. And then, of course, they met up in the girls' room to have a chat about what had happened. Peter was very excited about exploring. He was quite content with the fact that there were lots of things around them to do, and it was going to be fantastic living there, and they could go exploring in the mountains and the woodland. The others kind of agreed. They agreed to go exploring in the morning, but when they woke up, the outside of the window was a lot of rain, heavy rain, so they couldn't go exploring. So instead they explored the house, didn't they? And Lucy found herself in the wardrobe, and then at the end of chapter 1 was where she had only just met Mr. Tumnus. Okay, so have a little think. What were your views on the text? Did you enjoy that chapter? Did you enjoy have you enjoyed the book so far? Do you think it's the type of story or the type of book that you would read in your own time? And if so, why? Again, just have a think about it. You don't need to write anything down yet. Super. Now, what we're going to do is let me just grab my book. We are going to have a look at questions today and start to embed some knowledge. So we're using PEE, which is point, evidence, explanation. Okay, so point, you are going to come up with your idea, and you're going to summarize your idea. The first E is all about evidence. You're going to find something from the text to essentially prove the point that you have made, and then explain. You are going to explain why what you have chosen is significant. Why does that quotation have an effect on the reader? So, for example, number 1 says, what does Peter think of the house they are in? So if I have a look on chapter 1, Peter says something quite early on. He says, we've fallen on our feet and no mistake, said Peter. This is going to be perfectly splendid. That old chap will let us do anything we like. Right. So actually, just from that piece of text, it tells us, doesn't it, that Peter thinks that they've had a bit of a touch. So Peter thinks that the house that they are going to be living in is splendid. They're going to have a fantastic time there, and it's full of adventure. So that is my point. Peter thinks that the house that they are living in is going to give them lots of adventure. Okay, my evidence for that is that he says we've fallen on our feet and no mistake. Okay, a bit later, he also goes on to say, you might find anything in a place like this. Okay, he talks about going on an adventure, so I could use that for my evidence, and then I would go on to explain why that is significant. He knows that if they can go on lots of adventures, they're going to have a nice time. They're going to be able to spend lots of time together. They're going to spend a lot of time in the outdoors. Okay, it makes the reader think about what that place might look like because of the things that he's said. Why is it a splendid place? What do you start to think about? Okay, so number 2, how does the author show how Lucy is feeling about the new house? So you could have a little look through and find something that's a little bit later on, where it talks about Lucy staying behind where the wardrobe is. So she's quite inquisitive. So you could say that Lucy is intrigued by the new house. How do I know that she's intrigued? Well, it says she stayed behind because she thought it would be worthwhile trying the door of the wardrobe. Okay. She wanted to get inside the wardrobe. She wanted to see whether it was unlocked. She wanted to see what was in there. Why did she want to do that? Because she was interested. Okay, it shows us that she's interested. It doesn't have to tell us Lucy was interested in the wardrobe, but that language tells us by reading between the lines, like that inference that we talked about yesterday. Okay, number 3 talks about, I've sort of answered this one already. How does the author show that Lucy is curious as she enters the wardrobe? And it says, looking into the inside, she saw several coats hanging up, mostly long fur coats. There was nothing Lucy liked so much as the smell and feel of fur. She immediately stepped into the wardrobe and got in amongst the coats and rubbed her face against them. Okay. The author shows that she's curious because she immediately stepped in. She rubs her face on the coats. But of course she doesn't shut the door because she doesn't know what's in there. She wouldn't want to be locked in there. Okay, so again, it creates that effect of intriguing the reader because Lucy's intrigued, but she hasn't shut the door because she doesn't know what's in there. Okay, so it's about making a point, finding some evidence to back that point up using the text, so only from chapter 1, and then giving me a reason why that was significant. Why have you chosen that piece of writing as a quote? Now that is what your task is for today's guided reading. There are 5 questions. There's a sheet with the 5 questions and some space underneath each one for you to answer in, and you will find that underneath the video. So have a little look at them. Don't feel you have to do all 5. Do as many as you can manage. If you get all 5 done, then brilliant. If you only manage 3, that's fine as well. Okay, do what you can. But have a look and try your best to use that PEE, point evidence explanation. Okay, and we will look forward to seeing that later. Have a lovely rest of the day, Year 5.